I'm Kat Matthews. I second in the world at the World Ironman Championships this year, going into the 2022 World Champs, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Kat Matthews, welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Brad. It's honestly a privilege. I feel excited to be here. I'm nervous about it.
Oh, wow. Well, the feeling's mutual, Kat. We have had a few exchanges in recent years just on social media, in particular around the Physical Performance Show, which I know over the years you've enjoyed some of the episodes. And I was surprised last night, ahead of our recording this evening, Australian time, that you posted that it was the first ever podcast you listened to recommended by a senior physio about 6 years ago.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really... I'm 31 now, and I don't know when normal people get into podcasts, but I didn't get into them until I was like 24, 25. And so, yeah, it was only because he was commuting to work and he was like, you should listen to this podcast as part of your professional development. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And then as soon as I got into it, I was like, oh, wow, okay, I'll listen to this a lot more than I thought I would want to.
Oh, wow. Over the years, Kat, you're an avid learner. I think people that follow your career and those that are going to get introduced to you through this episode, it's what I'd say is one of the hallmarks of you as an athlete, as a performer, is this commitment to ongoing learning. Anything that you've sort of picked up over the years from the show, just out of interest, that you've sort of thought about and applied and built on?
You're testing me now. I'm actually a bit guilty of listening to stuff and not actually writing, consolidating my learning. It's more like I take stuff from it in the moment, and then I've moved on or something like that. So no, there's not. I can't give you one thing or two things that I think are fundamentals from the show, but I would back myself to have listened to a large percentage of them.
Oh, well, thank you, Kat. It's a mutual thrill. You are an endurance star on the rise. And when you look back through your bio, it's quite startling. It's not like you've had 10 seasons of full-time training under your belt. This is still really one of your first few seasons as a professional. I believe you turned professional in only 2019.
Yeah. So I was working full-time as a physio until April 2019, when I did it sort of coincided, like it couldn't have been better, the timing really. I'd applied for full-time training with the British Army, and the week before I found out that I got it, I raced an age group race, I think it was the week before, and qualified for my pro license, and then found out the Army was like, cool, we'll give you a year to go full-time. They didn't match up with each other, but they did on the calendar, so it was pretty amazing. So yeah, April, May 2019, I sort of dropped my clinical hours massively, and then was ready. I did my first Ironman at the end of 2019. And then obviously with COVID, I was then in like full-time training and was really able to maximize that time. Through
COVID, but in your first World Ironman 70.3 champs, you finished 16th with only 4 months of full-time training.
Yeah.
Because, of course, you've got to see this talent through, right? You can't turn your back on it. Prior to that, you'd picked up in 2015 a 5th place at the World Age Group Champs. Your first 70.3 race in Calgary, you took the overall win. So it's kind of not something that you can put your toe in, test the waters and then walk away from, right? I assume that's what's driving you to find out just what you've got.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think I never got into the sport wanting to make it a career. I still now, a bit bizarre, the idea that it is a career. I am just passionate about that, like finding out what I can do. And I think it's what you said before. Again, it's like just the learning that of why, and then how, and then can I implement that? And therefore, well, if I can implement all of that, how good can I be? So it's like every race is like, yeah, cool, one step up, but it's never like, that's my best. This is like one step further to finding out what the best is.
Yeah, gosh, it's an ongoing science experiment. N equals 1.
Yeah, that's my life.
N equals 2, yourself and obviously your wonderful husband, Mark, who is always there in the background supporting you.
I love how much every interview I've done over the last few weeks after St. George and Sub 8, I feel like it's all about Mark, and it's like the best thing ever. it's a genuine shared sort of endeavor. So he had done triathlon his whole, life basically. And we met during triathlon through the army, and I was very, very average, below average. And he supported me at that time to just enjoy the sport as he was. And then it's suddenly the sort of, I guess, the seesaw slipped slightly, and I was starting to do really well, and he lost a little bit of interest just because through work he couldn't commit as much time to it. And as most people who are listening know, as soon as you lack the hours to train, it becomes very demotivating. Whereas I then had more time to train and I was getting better. And so he just put everything into me. And I guess that's one of the reasons why the 16th at the first World Champs was probably down to him and his ability to coach me through all the little things like nutrition and pacing and just getting out on the bike and things like that.
Yeah, wow. And on the army, you are still actively serving, but you're being supported for pursue performance, correct? You're also a trained, as you've mentioned, physiotherapist, but you're not practicing at the moment.
Yeah. Still serving with the British Army, and I'm currently in a sort of sideline of elite sport, which they don't do very often. People think they do, but it's an absolute privilege. I think what's really cool about my position is that because I practice as a physio in the army, everything I'm learning now is really useful and translatable, and vice versa. So everything I learned through my clinical years, I'm then now able to apply to myself. And I feel like I'm just constantly, like you said it before, like a case study. And I feel like I'm practicing physio every day, but just on one person.
Well, N equals one. What a great physiological specimen that one person is, Kat. And I should say as well, as a guest, you've been so heavily requested by listeners of this show. It's been, can you please get Kat Matthews on? So here you are. Before we go to the obvious two big talking points, performance-wise, the sub-8 recent event and also your silver medal at your Ironman World Champs debut. Just on the background, though, we know you're a trained physiotherapist. You're in the British military, but what were you doing through your formative sporting years? Like, what were you doing?
I did a lot of activity, I guess. So my father was in the Royal Marines, and we were a pretty sporty family. So starting as kids, our family holidays were always orienteering, like running with a map. And then I got into hockey really early on. So just like normal hockey. Some people call it field hockey. And I played that for quite a high level. So from 5 and through 5 years old, really, until through university, I played field hockey. I didn't get selected for the England team, which I was a bit gutted about at the time, but I just wasn't good enough. I didn't commit like time to it. And I also played basketball. So I played that to regional level, and I wasn't tall enough apparently to be considered for the national team again. So I was like constantly trying to find, I wasn't really, I was just enjoying the team sports. But I did also do 3 times a week of club swimming. And that was my social, I guess, I had a couple of friends there and we just had a good time, and 90 minutes passed really quickly. And then Saturday night galas where you got McDonald's on the way home. It was an introvert teenager dream. So yeah, I did lots of team sports, but a lot of it was physical fitness. I was always the fit one as well as the fastest, which is a bit weird. And then cross country. So I was pretty good at cross country running. I came 10th in like English schools, which is again like quite a high level in England, 1 year, and then some sort of top 50s in other years. So you've sporty, absolutely. And non-specialized through those formative years as well, which of course we recognize in sports medicine circles as a great blessing to a young developing athlete. And also fun. Great to hear that fun was a big part of it. You and the sporting genes, you said your father was active. Your mum, was she active as well? Sporty? Yeah, I don't give my mum enough credit, which is unfair. So she actually was in the army briefly as well, but you had to leave back then when you had kids. Yeah. And she's a great runner. She runs now for fun. Like, she's excellent. Again, she's a sort of all round, but would never sing her own praises. So I feel like I got a really good balance of my dad in terms of like high performance, my mum in terms of humility and enjoyment. But there's some key moments in my childhood where I remember really vividly not really fancying. I decided myself I wanted to train for cross country, for example, but I was like, I really don't want to go for a run. And I used to do some of my runs with my dad, and he was like, okay, no worries. Well, let me know if you fancy it. And it was like, it was always my choice. There was never any pressure from my parents to do it if I didn't want to, which I think was massive in terms of my development of, the enjoyment and personal drive.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. A great modeling from your parents and wise parents parenting as well, right? Who was the first triathlete or endurance athlete that caught your attention? I mean, it didn't really fall onto your radar until obviously a bit later, but or were you aware of the all-conquering British triathletes when you were going through, your study, university?
Not really. I think I was aware of Tim Don.
Yep.
Mainly, I think, because he was on a few magazines in just like his crop top and pants. I always thought it was a bit bizarre that triathlon, it was a bit bizarre. I never paid any attention really to triathlon, which I feel a bit guilty about now. And then when I started doing triathlon, it was all the British girls. So Non Stanford, Vicky Holland. And of course the Brownies. But again, they were a bit later on. I even though they'd already done so well at the Olympics, I wasn't a fan enough of the sport back then, whereas now I'm completely obsessed.
Completely obsessed. Kat, we theme the show as, the highs, lows and learnings. The obvious place to go is your recent successes, 1 month apart, which physiologically I just find fascinating. And we do want to know how you pulled that off. But maybe we start with the most recent success, and that is the Sub-8 project, completing that in 7 hours, 31 minutes, 54 seconds, with your splits being 54:43 for the 3.8K swim, 3 hours, 50 minutes, 6 seconds for the 180K bike with a team time trial, and then a 2:46:09 marathon to finish. Firstly, congratulations. Secondly, I was just amazed watching you go through that bad patch on that marathon and come back so strong. I know you would have spoken about this a lot already post the event, but a couple of weeks on, how are you reflecting on that almighty achievement?
I just was I was just writing down those splits. I haven't really looked back at that. Here we
go, ready? 54:43 for 3 hours 50 for the bike and 2:46 for the marathon.
Like you said, for the team time trial on the bike. And I think that's fundamental. This project, it was a team event, and I take no credit for that being the fastest Ironman time. There's some misinterpretation, I think, of the event. For me, it was purely about bringing together a team to see if I could therefore go as fast as possible. And I think we achieved that. It was a bit of a dream that we went. I know I didn't quite make my target. I think someone puts out that I said I could do a 7:30. I'm not really sure where those numbers came from. I think somebody said I was going to run a 2:40. I'm not too sure I was given enough notice to try and put a number on my run, but I text my coach that week saying I'm definitely not in 2:40 shape. If I run a 2:45, I'd be really happy, but that would be a stretch. Massively underestimated how hard the bike would be. I think we thought it was going to be a team time trial where you go a bit faster, but you sit on the back and you're cruising along. And it sounds like exactly the same for the boys as well. Joe's just talked about it, and Christian. My heart rate was identical, the average on the bike, than it was in St. George. So the effort, the intensity was exactly the same. The watts were slightly lower because obviously it was basically a flat course. And I think the extra intensity came from the concentration element of staying in that group and these micro surges. So it's hard to say. I'm over the moon with the team effort and how much inspiration I've got from the team, and how many people have messaged saying how inspired they were and how much they enjoyed the broadcast. And then on a personal level, I think it goes back to what you said right at the start, was actually understanding that I was a month out from St. George and it was going to be what it was going to be. It was hard going into that, knowing that I hadn't had these months of preparation that you normally need mentally to then perform at your best.
Mm. And those that aren't aware, this project, you were offered the opportunity late in the preparation due to the withdrawal of Lucy Charles from a bone stress injury, and you took it on, but it wasn't something you'd been thinking about for the last 12 months.
No, but I'm not sure if that's an excuse. So I had 8 weeks before the event, so 4 weeks before St. George, and then 4 weeks between the two. Well, it was 4 weeks between the two. And I think I'm not sure if I would have changed my training, maybe theoretically, but in actuality, as everybody knows, you can't plan more than a few weeks ahead. And there was nothing I could have done differently in the last 3 months before sub 8 that would have made that race better for me. So I don't see the last minute sub as, an excuse in any way.
Well, I don't think you need an excuse, Kat. It was sub 8 and you went 7:31. The thing that I am really finding fascinating is I heard you share on the Inside Tri podcast in preparation for this episode that in St. George, where you picked up your silver medal at your World Championship debut, which is just incredible behind return to form Danielle Reef, collecting, I think it was her 5th world champ title, right? But in that run leg, the marathon off the bike, from what I could gather, you had a rotten time and you used the word, and I smiled, perhaps even laughed out loud to myself. You used the word that it was traumatic. I've done one Ironman when I turned 40, midlife correction last year in Cairns, and I have described when people ask me about it, how it was. And I've used that word as well. It was traumatic. The run leg was trauma. And I know how I still view that race and where I went to for that to finish it. And yet 1 month later, you're back on a start line trying to do an undertaking that no one's done. How do you mentally make peace with the trauma of a run leg that didn't go to plan in St. George? Yes, it delivered you a silver medal, but that's scary stuff.
Yeah, it's a great question. Just to give it a little context, the reason it was so traumatic in St. George, because it's not normally for me. I normally actually genuinely love the run and it's all in control and I'm happy and it's fine. I'm often smiling even. But I had some illness going into St. George. I then was healthy before the race, but as I returned to running, I picked up a calf strain, as you do, because obviously you're chasing race fitness, picked up a calf strain anyway. Didn't have the best prep, which is one of the reasons why. And then during the race, as it was World Champs, I had to go off pretty hard to stay with Daniela. And I thought I was in better shape than I was, I guess. So I overdid it in the first bit of the bike. I rode that first 2 hours the same as I rode the 70.3 World Champs. I think I got like a 3-hour power PB or something at the start of the Ironman. So that's great. Traumatic in terms of the emotional turmoil that I was in from the first kilometer. I still feel like I'm quite open to the idea of like mental health being, the spectrum and things can be traumatic for somebody and you can experience this negativity and actually it takes you a while to process a bit. It's not post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's acceptable, I think, to talk about things that were really challenging. And that honestly, I still find a little bit overwhelming of just how deep I had to go to finish, let alone to perform as well. So how did I come back from that? Not well, if I'm honest. I obviously, because I had put so much into it physically, health-wise, my body reacted quite badly. And again, I think I just messed something up with my electrolyte balance and my hydration as well during the race, that I struggled in the couple of weeks after that to really get my sort of fluid balance right. And that wasn't helped by the fact that I was also drinking more alcohol than I normally drink. So some self-induced, but I then really struggled for the next 2 weeks where I was chatting to Mark constantly. I had many sits on the floor after training sessions. I didn't finish training sessions that I had hoped to finish. I did 1 hour instead of 2 hours. I wasn't sure if I was healthy enough to race. I then got out to the event and I'd done maybe 2 sessions that had gone well. And when I say like sessions, so I coach myself through that period. I didn't think it would be beneficial to have my coach Bjorn actually setting me sessions. I'm pretty happy with the idea of understanding where I'm at health-wise and what I need to do intensity-wise to either recover, to maintain, or to improve. And I knew that there was no part of me that was going to be improving in those 4 weeks. So it was more about mental stability of having done some aerobic training, and then perhaps, if possible, getting in a little bit of intensity in the, LT1 rather than LT2. So I was super happy to have done a little bit of LT2 work on the run, because I still naively thought the bike was going to be easy. But yeah, so it was a challenge, and I'm really not sure if there was a right way to do it, but I guess perhaps I did it one way and it worked.
And that was just to put one foot in front of the other and fulfill your commitment, which you'd given, and rock up. And hope's not a good strategy typically, but it's not a bad one either. Yes, you just hope for the best.
Honestly, it was just constantly people asking how I was feeling, and I was just saying, yeah, well, I'll be ready on Sunday. And it was just I was just on this treadmill of hope that I would come round. And 1 week is enough time. If you've raced just 2 weeks ago, one more week is still plenty of time. And I was just confident in theory of this, I will recover, I'll be fine.
Gosh, you were speaking it into being. I mean, when you were passed on the run, you let out onto the run, Nicola Spirig, 2012 Olympic triathlon champion, silver medalist from 2016. Many refer to Nicola as one of the greatest female triathletes for good reason. And she was running very well. You were running so strong as well. I felt like I could feel your pain. Your heart maybe sunk a little bit. And I assume you probably thought, well, that's Nicola running away now, and I'll just keep going as best I can. But then when you launched the comeback and found another gear, talk us through that? I mean, that was remarkable. That was one of the gutsiest things I've seen in endurance sports for a long time.
That's very kind. I think so. I said before I was in 2:45 at a stretch pace, and I run relatively off heart rate. So I've raced without it, so I don't feel like I'm too reliant on it, but I know where my thresholds are and what I'm comfortable of maintaining. And so I set off at a heart rate that was higher than I'd ever raced an Ironman run before at, because that was the aim, to see where that limit was. And that was the pace that it was giving me. I think it was like 350, 355s or something. So I was on for a 240, 245, 246. It was a PB for me. And so I knew Nicola was running significantly faster from the first 3K. And so I'd already dealt with the idea that she was going to win. And it was like, fair play. She's just an incredible athlete. If she can finish this, like, she deserves it. Especially after what she's been through in the last couple of months with, injuries. And so I guess I'd already dealt with that. So when she came past, it wasn't a shock, a surprise, a negative emotion. It was a bit rubbish, but I don't remember feeling rubbish. All I remember thinking was I had planned in my head that I was going to, and this was during the first few laps of the run, I hadn't pre-planned this, that I was going to run the 14 laps as 2 lots of 5, get through those. And then I had 4 laps to play with and, see what I had. And so it sort of came at the perfect time where she overtook me just as we were about to start that 11th lap, and I was feeling okay. So I just kept running my own pace, and I think I maybe dropped 5 seconds a K as we overtook her, because it sort of happens naturally. And she at exactly the same time, in a way, blew up a bit. So I don't think it was that impressive. I just stuck to my pace, and I tried a bit harder when I thought I could. I think Mark said, she is one of the greatest of all time. This really means something. Like, if she beats you, fine, but if you beat her, do you want to beat her? That sort of idea that I was processing. And I guess it was just that decision that, yeah, I want to do this. I can do this. There's no reason why I can't. So just crack on.
Just crack on. I mean, you said you feel guilty of not always applying the learnings you take from things as you roll, but what's your top learning you're going to take away from your success in sub-8? 7:31, the endurance world celebrates it. What's the one thing you will do differently next time you take to an Ironman start line as a result? I'm
going to run harder from the start. I think that was my aim going in, is to bump up my personal conservative barrier to myself. And I know now that I can still finish strong, even if I run at, I think it was like seven beats higher than I ever have before. So yeah, that's really exciting for me. Like to run that off not great prep. I'm like, okay, cool. What can I do in the future?
Well, there might be a few nervous competitors listening in here, Kat. That's is exciting though. And on that, what does now the rest of your year look like leading into the 2022 Ironman World Championships taking place back on Kona, the spiritual home of the Ironman World Champs? What does the rest of the year look like calendar-wise?
I can't wait to get to Hawaii, basically. I've been there to spectate, but never raced. And I've been processing that over the last couple of days. And actually the swim I did this morning, I was like, yeah, I just want to settle right down and go back to basics and just train. I feel like I haven't consistently trained since, I don't know, January, February now. So I want to take a step back and just settle back into training. I get so much satisfaction out of, a really great training block. I'm not a desperate to race sort of person. I like to perform, obviously, but I want it to be at the best I can do. So I'm going to probably target the Collins Cup beforehand. And then I might race a 70.3, perhaps Swansea, PTO Dallas race in September as sort of, a short race, and then straight into Hawaii in October. I have got this like small idea that if Cozumel is on at the end of the year, I actually try and do sub 8 on a genuine Ironman course. I feel like that could be like the coolest thing. But I'm not one for really chasing the records and the targets. So I'm not sure if that's just me trying to work out what sub 8 meant to me, or whether I'm actually motivated to go sub 8. I don't know.
You would have spoken to Christian Blumenfeld about this, I assume. What was Christian's advice?
No, I didn't. It was more of afterthought, I think. Okay. But if he can swim like that in Cozumel, then I think I've got a good chance.
Oh gosh, well, all those 90-minute 3-time-a-week sessions through your formative years, I think haven't gone to waste, Kat. You're strong across all 3 disciplines. Kat, as you know, we theme this the highs, lows, and learnings. Of course, we've just covered some wonderful highs. What would be the darkest day in your professional career to date?
Other than the St. George run.
Other than the St. George off the bike marathon, correct?
Because that was probably it. I think, like everyone, I've had injuries that have really challenged you mentally. I know it's obviously quite pertinent in this podcast, injuries, but I think the main one for me that really drove me into the trying to aspire to be race in the professional field was in 2018, when I was still racing as an amateur. I had lost like a lot of weight over that first 6 months of the year, and I continue to like basically just keep pursuing this weight loss alongside more training, alongside more intensity and less social life. And I think I overdid that balance at some point. And then I had an injury where it was just an overload in my knee. I still undiagnosed in my head. And it must have taken, I don't know, a month to really settle, even just settle and then walk pain-free. And at the exact same time, I'd found out that in this like age group head, that I couldn't race the British champs at the standard distance in the age group field because I was deploying to Canada with the army for 4 months. And in my head, it was like the worst thing in the world. In hindsight, it was the best experience I've had in the army and as a clinician. It was the dream. But I went out there having this injury, and in the army, physical fitness is such an identifier. And for me, it was such an identifier that I went out there in a knee brace, under my uniform. It wasn't obvious, but I couldn't do any of I just mentally was and I had a coach at the time, and he was so good. I was like, I can't do any training. Don't set me anything. Just let me find myself and see how things are here. I still took my bike out with me, but I thought I'd sort of lost the sport. And at the time, the physio I was working with, she said, maybe you're not built for endurance sport. And I was just like, very frustrated with the whole idea of it. And I think I was maybe that day or the day after I signed up for this 70.3. I'd never done a middle distance before. And I was like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I gave myself 8 weeks from still taking naproxen to getting it to be able to perform in this 70.3. And I was so rubbish at the time. I guess that was the sort of the super low associated with that. How am I going to get out of this? And I don't associate that time now with negativity. I just associate it with opportunity, which sounds a bit cringe. And I've just said that out loud. But I think that for me was the moment I was like, well, what I can do right now is, and it was utilize the fact I had a gym there, utilize the fact I had time, utilize the people around me. I had a really cool ice machine. I had everything there that I could do. And I just did it rather than sort of spiral down into it. I'm never going to race again. And that was probably the result that made me think, I could actually be quite good, because that was where I hadn't really done any run. I was like back, that knee was happy to cycle, but it wasn't run happy. And so I went into the race thinking, I'm not sure if I can run, and came away with a 1:30 off the bike. So I was like, cool, this could go well.
This could go well. But out of that adversity, as you say, you found an opportunity. And I did cringe when you mentioned that. No doubt a well-intentioned practitioner, because I really don't think there are any poor-intentioned practitioners or people in the field, but sometimes just not mindful. I think my awareness was built early in my junior triathlon years. Unlike yourself, I fell in love with triathlon at 10 and pursued it wholeheartedly until 19, before kind of turning my back on the sport out of pain and disappointment, and then obviously returning to my roots. But Kat, I remember she was an excellent physiotherapist, and I traveled to see her to get help. But at one point she said, maybe, you're just not built for the sport as well. And she went through and listed all my structural flaws, my childbearing hips. That was wonderful to hear as a 16-year-old male. My tibial torsion, twisted legs for those, my bowed leggedness, and my flat feet. And I did leave there just going, my life feels like it's over. I had these aspirations and my body is not going to take me there. And we both know now as practitioners that it couldn't be further from the truth. How you're put together really doesn't matter. It's got to do with our tissue tolerances and the demands. But one of the things I really admire about yourself as a sports professional, also as a practitioner, a colleague, if you like, is that you are such a great advocate for dismantling the rhetoric around body image, body shape, and the correlation that doesn't exist to performance. It does to a point, but obviously there's limitations there. One of the questions we've got here, Kat, is from long-term listener of the show and big fan of yours, Kat Salpool, who comments, so many questions for Kat. I bet there's enough to chat to her all day. I'm such a fan. I would love to delve more into Kat's strong messaging that there's no ideal body shape for triathlon. What experiences, research, thoughts has Kat had to lead her to be such a great advocate for this message?
I think the main one's probably being born with the body that I've got and knowing that it's never going to look like the societal athlete that we see in social media. And I have struggled with that. I think as every teenager does. Maybe struggle is the wrong word for everybody, but it's definitely been in my face as an athlete, and as a female, maybe it's slightly more heightened, but I wouldn't say that that was necessarily fair. I think it's actually something I've learned from the last couple of years is that I've had as many men reach out to me as I have had females about this topic. And it's not one particular body shape that's reaching out either. It's those who I see as like, they are perfect. Why on earth would they think that? They are like me, somebody else, they're completely different. They're perfect. Why would they think that? And then it's like, oh, okay, so everybody's thinking this. It's not just me. It's like, actually, it's really eye-opening. So other experiences, I think, there's a couple of key things that I've written about before that I used to do cross country, and I was always slightly bigger. Like, I played hockey. I actually had like legs, and some people haven't got the same muscular structure. And what I'm really keen to make sure I do is never say that one is better than the other. Everybody is their own person and their own body shape. And I think it would be easy for me to start being like, yeah, strong, not skinny. Whereas actually, I don't think that's the right message at all either. There's nothing wrong with being, of a leaner, smaller frame, and there's nothing wrong with being of a, and I don't like using the words, so it's such a tricky area to talk about. Anyway, I'm waffling. So yeah, I was slightly had bigger legs than a lot of the girls, and I found running with the athletics pants awful because I would get like inner thigh rub, which now I know is a thing, but I didn't as a kid. And it's just little things like that I then thought I was too big to be good at running because the smaller girls were always beating me. And there was nothing that was ever any messaging from my parents or school or anything. It was purely what I saw and what I translated from like my own experiences. And I guess more recently is social media. So it's really rewarding for me to actually have a platform now based on performance that I can say, look, I'm performing at this level. This is how I look. It doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily make it any easier. Like when I had a new tri-suit for sub 8 and I couldn't run in it. And I said to the guys beforehand, I was like, I don't think I can run in it. It looks great when I'm standing still. It's really aero, I'm sure, but I'm really nervous about running in it. And I knew from the first few K that I was like, this is going to hinder my performance. So I'm going to have to take it down. And yeah, that was awful. Like I kept worrying about how I was looking. There's a camera on me the whole time. I'm the sort of person who'd never take my top off in the gym. Like I just don't see the point. I don't mind wearing a t-shirt. Why would I run in it? Like, again, some people love it. I get it. I just don't feel the need. Maybe it's a bit British. And so I think it's this idea of I've slowly developed the idea of that performance is all that matters. And it's only I who can, and whoever is listening can decide how they feel about their own body. And it's never going to be anything other than it is. And you're in complete control of that and how you feel about that. So it's like this, maybe I'm not wording it very well today, but no, it's a challenging topic, isn't it?
It is. And I do thank you for your, like Sally has your advocacy in the space. I just think you're a wonderful role model. You just said your body is always going to be what it is. You cannot change. Of course, you can try and manipulate the composition. And I think a mistake, and we spoke about this recently with nutrition researcher and PhD candidate Megan Keichman, that we look at athletes often for their key events of a season or a cycle, a workload cycle, and they may be in their race prep shape, whatever that means, but we can incorrectly assume that that's what we need to be like all year round. And I've spoken openly about this. I remember seeing Chris McCormack win the 1997 World Triathlon Championships as an aspiring junior, and Chris was super lean at that point. He had ribs showing underneath his singlet, and I thought as a teenager, right, you need to have ribs that show underneath your tri-singlet to become the world champion. That's
what you can see, isn't it? It's like, yeah.
But what you don't see is that that's not sustainable all year round. So I think we can't talk about this enough. And perhaps the best summary is let's just not comment on people's appearance. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. And again, but that has its own challenges because that's what we put out on social media is look how fit I look because this is how good I'm going to race. Yeah. So it's very challenging.
Yeah, I totally. Sorry, Kat, you go.
No, I just think that it's a constant barrier. And I don't think you can really, I'm not sure we can get it right. I think what we need to do is change the narrative around commenting on the two being linked to performance. The one comment could be said to somebody and it'd be the best thing they've heard all week. And if you say it to the same person 5 minutes later, it could send them into a spiral. And that's sort of up to them as well in terms of how they're dealing with their emotions. I'm just spiraling here, but you could bring it back to Professor Stephen Peters, the idea of it's not your problem, it's their problem. People need to be okay with their own weight, image, performance, rather than necessarily, and I need to be better at this. worrying about what other people are saying to me about it. So that's something that I've been working on this year, is being okay with it myself, looking in the mirror, being happy. And therefore I'm not so fazed when I'm on the start line and I know there's other people who are looking better than me. I'm like, just you wait, I'm going to perform like this. And I think that's would be my lesson from it, is like, it's not about having a vendetta about other people saying things. It's about working on your own happiness of your own body image and performance as two separate things.
Oh my gosh, that takes a lot of character, Kat. We had Emma Jeffcoat, Australian Olympic triathlete, share not too long ago on the show, and I was very saddened as a parent of three beautiful young girls who are all very differently put together. You wouldn't even believe they're the same parents, right? And it's just a great example of genetics. And to think that my girls may experience stereotypes and hardships through people's beliefs, and listening to Emma share some of the quite traumatic experiences she's had throughout her development, I was like, wow, we've still got a long way to go. Emma summarized that she'd worked through things over the years to summarize it, that her strength is her strength. And as you say, once again, we can't say that that's the magic formula either. This is just an individual thing. Let's move away from linking how people look to their performance. Kat, exploring some of these learnings further, you said in the Inside Try podcast that it's a matter of balancing stress and expectation. How do you now move forwards with all eyes looking at you, expecting high performance from you going into the World Championships in 4 or 5 months' time? How do you balance that stress and the expectation? Well, you don't know yet. Come back and
I think it's different every time you do a race. I think it's about your own, I used that word just a minute ago, but stability. I think it's about that mental stability and trusting in where you're at. So I knew before St. George that I should be in, before I did Lanzarote 70.3, I had a great race. I knew that was spot on where I should be performance wise. And if I can replicate that in St. George, then I could win. Like, I just took that as like a fact. And you sort of know as well, like, that's Annie Howe. She's coached by Dan Lorang. He knows what shape other people are in. Laura Phillip race. You start to create this database of, okay, who's where and what's going on. And I just used that for St. George. There was a lot of pressure. I was, talked about as the favourite, and I was like, just wait. Like, you can't rule Daniela out. You can't rule out that Anne's, come round. You can't. So I don't necessarily worry about other people's expectations as long as I'm happy with where I'm at. It's slightly different with sub 8. And then going forward to Hawaii, I think I'll use the same idea. I'll use this, I guess it's a confidence mentality of, what do I need to do to be happy on the start line that I can have the swim I can do? And that is train consistently for X many months. That's 20 kilometers a week for the next 4 months, done, tick. That's all I need to do. And actually, that's something I worked on at the beginning of this season with a sports psychologist, was this, I guess it's confidence profiling, like understanding where I get the confidence from. So I'm in the race, I'm running sub 8. I know that I'm at 170 heart rate, and I know that that's a physiologically happy place for me. And if I just keep running at that, then that's done. So then when I'm training, I know that I need to have sustained efforts at and around 170, 175. And then I'll be happy to run that in a race. Like, it's just this real rational breakdown of coping with my own expectations and trying not to necessarily let other people's expectations and pressure like filter into my own world.
Gosh, it's powerful. You said, you asked the question, what do I need to do to be happy on the start line? And I've also heard you share, Kat, that you have to be mentally sound to be physically well. So I guess this is a strong link. You need to be psychologically in a good space, happy, enjoying it, well prepared, and pull the trigger and release, right? And I think that comes a lot from the physio background as well. Like, I went straight into my first, proper job was in the army. It was at Headley Court, which is a big rehabilitation centre for complex injuries, some post-Afghanistan and some just rehab that wasn't getting any better.
And I learned very quickly that our physical experiences are linked to psychology. They're the same in a way. And so I think I've always brought that into my own training, that if you're not ready to be there, then what's the point? You're not going to be able to perform, because you have to be there mentally first. And I experienced that really heavily and negatively in Challenge Daytona in 2020. I'd worked so hard during lockdown to have this idea. My dad had said to me, the person who's winning at the end of 2020 is going to be the person who's dealt with COVID the best. And I was like, right, that's a good challenge. I'm going to be the person who's coped with COVID the best. Psychologically, bear in mind I hadn't had COVID, and so I had a really great performance at Ironman Florida in November, which emotionally was similar to, it was like complete emptying of the tank. And then I wasn't prepared to race in Daytona, and I didn't want to race. I was like, a week before the race, I was actually stopped a training session and rang my husband. I was like crying. I was like, I can't do this. I don't want to be here. And he was like, well, you're there anyway. What's the point? Just race, give it a go. And I wasn't healthy. I wasn't physically fit, and I wasn't mentally fit. And all of those together then meant that I actually DNF'd, and it's the first and hopefully the only ever time I'll do it. But that just reaffirmed this idea of, like, psychologically, for me, it's different for some people, I'm sure, but I have to be 100% emotionally ready to hurt. Otherwise I can't perform at my best.
Gosh, you have to be 100% emotionally ready to hurt. Otherwise you cannot perform at your best. I think most people could recognize and can understand that. It's you have to be ready to hurt. It's pain, right? It's enduring pain and going to very uncomfortable places.
Yeah, and
it's scary.
And you train that. It's not just, I don't enjoy I'm not one of these people who like loves to suffer and loves the pain, but I think I get a lot of learning from doing that in training sessions, like knowing that this rep is really hurting, and if you finish this rep, then it means that you can finish the race. And I always have those like big sort of, just finish this rep, and that will mean that when you're hurting in the race, you can finish. It's just this constant visualization in a way to performing in a race. And so every single rep that you do that really hurt, that's that, I don't know, the last 5K of the marathon.
Which is when you need it. You mentioned there, Kat, just two themes to explore before we jump into a performance round. Emptying the tank, you do that every time you take to a start line, excluding that one DNF. How do you fuel the tank? How do you ensure that Kat Matthews has enough on board, avoids the pitfalls of energy deficiency, low energy availability? How do you fuel the tank? Fundamentally,
I love eating, so I don't think I struggle with this one at all. I also have a husband, and we like to indulge. So I learned again early on that the importance of macronutrients, and one of my main focuses is protein. And if I get enough, protein comes without compromise. So even if I've had a massive pizza and donuts galore, if I will eat protein on top of that still, even though I know it's going to be a positive calorie, I don't need it calorie wise. But I think that's pretty vital for me. If I ever, especially on days that I run, there's some compromise on rest days, maybe shouldn't be. I appreciate that. But if I'm running, it's like protein comes first, and then I naturally know that I get enough carbohydrate because I'm happy to eat more of anything. So it's not something I often have to work at. In a way, I'm the opposite. Like, I have to try and control myself with unhealthy indulgences, like going to the pub with Mark and having a drink, having a burger. So I think it's a balance that is harder for me, but on the other side, in terms of being actually over fat percentage for performance, like if I want to really improve with that, I come closer to a line that is that borderline of body fat percentage. And I'm not sure if I'm brave enough yet to get there. But I guess at the start of the podcast, you said, it's only been a few years of full-time training. I draw it back to, well, if I'm able to perform at this body fat percentage right now, think where I'll naturally be in 5 years' time, And so another maybe useful bit of information is over the last year and a half, so from January 2021 through until October 2021, so just in 8 months of, one full season, I think I put on about 2 kilos, but lost about 1% of body fat percentage. So it was like really interesting to see. And again, that was, supported by my coach, who has a very, very good way of explaining performance and understanding that you have to, have a balance. You don't want to have excess fat, but you also need to find what's hormonally right and what's happy as well. I'm at the moment happy to be happy rather than to be near the line and too risky.
Yeah, which once an athlete's in that, LEA state or low energy availability state, just thinking physiologically, the risk of bone stress injuries can be markedly heightened. And is it worth it? Well, is it worth absorbing that risk? Because risk is different to rate, right? An injury rate. But as you say, it's a fine line to come close to, one that you seem to be doing very well with in terms of where you sit relative to that line at the moment. So well done, Kat. Just curiously on the protein intake, is that something that you try and hit based off a grams per kilogram calculation, or does that vary through the season or a training block?
So I'm probably higher than some people. I want to preach the 1.8 to 2 per kilogram. And I think it makes sense to me. Yeah, no, I don't know if that's...
and it's working. It's working. Many do preach that sort of, that formula. And yeah, I mean, I noticed from having to dive into bone stress injuries deeply that protein is just so key for if we talk about bones, let alone the other building blocks of our running body or triathlon body. So, Kat, no, that's brilliant. The other quick thing to delve into here, Kat, would be the strength and conditioning. You seem to be a real proponent of that. Any sort of tips you'd share? Maybe shaking your head, maybe not a big proponent of it.
So just on the previous topic and linking to this topic, I think it's interesting to understand the barriers of people in eating protein and body image and hypertrophy and strength and conditioning and that's like a whole nother world, isn't it? So I think that's something I've understood, is that if I eat this amount of protein, it's not going to make me bulk up, because I'm probably still at an energy deficit at the end of the day with the endurance training that I do, or at least neutral. And that's not going to gain muscle. That's not how it works. Whereas people assume that, she probably eats 2 grams a kilo. That's probably why she's so muscly. Like there will be that perception, which I still find crazy. And then strength conditioning wise, I've seesawed massively. At the start of my sort of, let's say, triathlon career, I was basically an advocate for not doing it. And I was like, well, I don't think you need to bother. I don't do it. What's the point? Don't waste your time. Sleep instead. Because I think people cut out sleep before and then they'll do 20 hours of training. Whereas actually, I think sleep's one of the most important. Why not sleep for 8 hours and then see what training you can fit in? 8 hours is better than 20 if you're actually recovering from it, that idea. So I think for most people, strength conditioning is too much of a focus and it detracts from their endurance training. But I think that's too broad brush, and I think it has to be individualized. So if there's things that you are needing to improve on and you need to make those improvements because you're seeing issues in terms of your consistency in your endurance training, then you need to step back from hours or whatever you're doing, intensity or volume, and focus on the strength and conditioning and make that your priority for the next number of weeks. However, whether it's mentally, it's easy to focus on 4, 6, whatever it is, weeks, and then reevaluate. I don't think it has to be, you must do 3 sessions a week every week, because I know for the last 2 months, I haven't stepped foot in a gym, for example.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It has to be individualized. If it's a polarized discussion or binary, it's yes or no. I think that misses the mark. And the demands of long course triathlon are enormous. It really is fitting in a fourth discipline, if you like. So of course that has to be wisely done based on the individual's preferences, background, injury history, etc. Once again, you seem to be doing a great job, Kat. So don't mess with the formula. Kat, are you ready for a performance round? You can chalk this up as a session for the day.
Okay.
Here we go. Kat Matthews, what is your training session that you most dislike?
Any long swimming reps, like 800s, for example. I just, this fills me with dread.
How many are we talking about?
Probably even just one, and I don't like it.
Oh gosh, training session most loved, Kat?
Any run session with threshold and tempo reps in.
Beautiful. Favorite pre-race meal?
I always eat plain rice now, and a lot of it.
And a lot of it. Anything on the rice?
Sometimes no. Very occasionally, the day before the race, I'll have maybe like a bit of tomato sauce. I've created this new tomato sauce, a bit of cheese, bit of chicken, like a rice pizza, I'm calling it.
Kat Matthews rice pizza. Bedtime, morning time, what does that look like?
Bedtime is ideally like 9:30. There's been occasions where it's been 5 to 8 and I want to go to bed. My husband gives me a 8 o'clock like curfew sort of thing. And then morning time, I don't set an alarm on most days, which I think is important, only when I have to swim, and that's sort of 7 o'clock. So I'd sleep until 8 if I could every day.
Yeah, it's a great point. Kat, who is the athlete you most admire and why?
Right at the moment, it's Daniela Rife because she's beating me, right? So I think I admire I know how much effort that takes. So it's this admiration of, okay, you can be better. I can be better.
Iron sharpens iron. The toughest competitor you've ever raced against? Who's that and why?
My husband, because he keeps beating me. It'd probably be Daniela Rife again, right? Like, she's beaten me twice in Ironmans now. So there's no one else at the moment.
Yep, you can go Daniela twice. Is there a mantra that you use, Kat, when you race or compete? A regular one, that is?
Just choice. It's my choice to be there. It's my choice how hard I work, and therefore it's my choice the outcome.
Powerful. Just choice. Best recovery tip, Kat? You may have already mentioned it a few times, I feel.
Sleep.
One word to describe your racing style.
Consistent.
Oh, nice one. How would you, Kat Matthews, describe being in the zone?
Balanced, mentally and physically.
When was the last time you were in the zone?
Probably the Lanzarote 70.3 bike course.
Wow, I was expecting the sub-8.
No.
I'm going to go near St. George, but yeah, I was expecting sub-8. No?
No.
Wow. That's a long day outside the zone. So the 70.3 Lanzarote course. And final question in the performance round here, Kat. We know that epic sessions do not make champions, but it's a fun question to explore. The hardest session you can ever recall completing, Kat?
Pre my first Ironman in 2019, I did like 3 blocks of 40 minutes at race pace. And I've never done it again, and I will never do it again. It was horrendous. I don't even know how I did that. It should be easy, but it wasn't. On the turbo.
Yeah, on the turbo too. Yeah, that is a tough session. Kat Matthews, you're out of the performance round. And the final 2 questions are the set questions that every guest of the show since episode 1 has been issued. And that is the first question. If you could boil everything you've learnt to date into one single piece of advice to help listeners of this show perform at their physical best, what is Kat Matthews' solitary piece of advice going to be?
I've thought long and hard about this, obviously, for many years. It's to educate yourself both internally and externally. So internally through understanding your own body and particularly your own heart rate variability not heart rate variability, but heart rate and the way it changes during different intensity levels. And externally through theory, education, understanding the importance of why you're getting that training overload, why that intensity, what's the purpose. And so you can then generate your own bigger, like wider understanding of what the point is. And so you're motivated to do it.
So really understand the why behind the what externally, and then have some awareness of that internal barometer of what's happening physiologically. Have I summarized that kind of?
Yeah.
You can say no.
Sure.
No, I haven't, have I?
I didn't explain it well enough. I think just the big one is, for me, I think, is understanding your own internal barometer, to use your word. I think that's important.
Okay, Kat Matthews, internal barometer. And Kat, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. Now, don't be nasty and give everyone the 3 by 40 minute turbo trainer challenge. What is Kat Matthews' challenge going to be?
So I want to do this week. So I'm going to therefore set it for everyone else, because it might sound simple, but for me, it's one of the hardest things to get done. And it's just 3 sets of calf raises throughout the week. So you can do them whenever you want, but it's 3 sessions, whether it takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to start at 2 times 10 on each leg, straight leg, bent leg. And then hopefully wherever you're at, 2 times 10, 1 lots of 25 or 3 lots of 15, whatever it is, 3 this week, and then see how you feel at the end of the week. Hopefully you want to do it again.
Kat, I'm absolutely thrilled with this physical challenge. It's the Kat Matthews calf raise challenge for the week. So if you do take it on, please tag Kat in with this challenge. It'd be great. And the show at Physical Performance Show. It'd be great to see some people taking this on. So just to clarify, it was 3 sets of calf raises through the week, and people can either do 2 lots of 10 or 1 lot of 25. Is that correct?
Yeah. Or if you're really good, 3 lots of 15. It's up to you.
Or the 3
in one session.
In one session, yep. With good form too, not racing them, control.
Oh, yeah. Full range of movement, nice metronomic up and down, 1-to-1 tempo. We'll start with that.
Beautiful. I'm with you. 1 second up, 1 second down. Kat Matthews, you are a trailblazer in this endurance sport in space, but also for so many reasons, such a great role model and advocate for sport and also healthy lifestyle. So thank you for your contribution through your early stages of your career. We're all fascinated to watch this journey unfold, and we certainly wish you all the best for the season ahead. So thanks for stopping by the Physical Performance Show.
No, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the next however many episodes of this year, and I'll definitely be listening in.
Well, you're up next, Kat. So thanks again.
Thanks, Brad.